watching at home or streaming online. We also would like to welcome Directors Hendricks, Webb, Fordson, and Vice Mayor Wyrick, who are participating with us via video conferencing. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Director Hendricks. Director Richardson.
Present.
Director Webb.
Here.
Director Peck.
Here.
Director Hines.
Present.
Director Wright.
Here.
Director Campuris.
Present.
Director Fortson.
Here.
Director Adcock.
Present.
Vice Mayor Wyrick.
Present.
Mayor Scott.
Present.
And Director Richardson is here.
Thank you so much, Director Richardson. Let me now recognize Mr. City Attorney, who's going to do the prayer for this today.
Please join me. We're at a time where decisions have to be made that seem easy when we're first looking at them, but then we have to realize that any decision is probably going to impact whether we can do something else we'd like to do. We believe that a door opened is an opportunity. Let us approach this, that even for those opportunities we don't take now, we never think of it as a closed door, particularly if the purpose is to help our citizens thrive, to fulfill their obligations and dreams, and to make this a city where people welcome each other with a wave and a hello. Amen.
Amen. We all stand for Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We have one modification for tonight's agenda, to the addition of item M1 to the consent agenda.
So moved.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read the consent agenda along with item M1, and also Director Webb has asked that item 12 be held separately, and we will hold that separately. Madam Clerk.
A motion to approve the minutes of the September 1st, 2020, September 15th, 2020, October 6th, 2020, October 20th, 2020, and November 2nd, 2020, Little Rock City Board of Directors meeting. A resolution to set December 1st as the date of public hearing on the appeal of the Planning Commission's recommendation of denial for a planned zoning district titled Goodwin Manor Long Form PCD located at 3708 Garrison Road in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. A resolution is set December 1st as the date of a public hearing on the appeal of a Planning Commission's recommendation of denial for a planned zoning district titled Mountain Park Addition, PRD, located at the northeast and northwest corners of North Taylor Street and Peace Street in the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. A resolution to transfer title of the property located at 2301 South Martin Street from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to Hoan T. Nin and Tian Van Va to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs and for other purposes. A resolution to transfer title of properties located at 3401 West 10th Street and 3423 West 10th Street from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to Marcus McClendon to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs and for other purposes. A resolution to transfer title of property located at 1605 Jones Street, 2423 West 17th Street, 2522 West 17th Street from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to Marvell Banks, DBA Bank Investments to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs and for other purposes. A resolution to transfer title of property located at 1423 South Maple Street, 1524 South Martin Street, 1617 South Martin Street, 1623 South Martin Street 1515 South Pine Street, 1105 South Balmer Street, 3321 West 16th Street, 3323 West 16th Street, 3401 West 17th Street, 3403 West 17th Street, 3419 West 17th Street, and 3327 West 17th Street from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to Robert Alexander, DBA Custom Made Properties to be used for neighborhood revitalization programs and for other purposes. A resolution to approve the utilization of home investment partnerships, program community housing development organizations set aside and home program income funds to Inaffordable Housing, Inc. to produce 3 affordable housing units within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. A resolution to approve the utilization of home investment partnerships, program community housing development organizations set aside, and home program income funds to the University District Development Corporation, Inc. to produce 7 affordable housing units within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to approve an increase to the contract amount of Harbor Environmental, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $27,578 for professional engineering services for the Bowman Road Improvement Project and for other purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution to authorize the city manager to approve an increase to the contract amount for Michael Baker International in an amount not to exceed $138,569 for professional engineering services for Bowman Road Improvement Project and for other purposes, funding from the 3/8 cent capital improvement sales tax and the limited tax general obligation capital improvement bonds. A resolution to ratify emergency purchases of supplies or services over the amount of $50,000 made in response to the COVID-19 pandemic during the times of the emergency declared by the mayor, the governor of the state of Arkansas, and the federal government, and for other purposes. A resolution to sell properties owned by the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to the University of Arkansas for medical sciences to allow for construction of a UAMS daycare facility and associated parking lot, and for other purposes. A resolution to authorize the city manager to extend the agreement with Explain My Benefits LLC for a 5th term in an amount not to exceed $85,000 to provide benefit administration and enrollment services for eligible employees and dependents of the city of Little Rock and the city's participating affiliated agencies to provide certain web-based applications for patient protection and Affordable Care Act forms 1094C and 1095C, reporting services, and for other purposes.
Move for the adoption of consent
I have
agenda.
one more, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
A resolution to consent to the assignment of the lease agreement of 300 East Roosevelt Road, Little Rock, Arkansas, and for other purposes. That concludes the consent agenda.
Move for the adoption of consent agenda.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read item number 12 for the first time. Wouldn't that be the number, item number 12?
A resolution to authorize the mayor, city manager, and city clerk to enter into a transfer agreement for ownership of the right-of-way from the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to the Arkansas Department of Transportation and for other purposes.
Move for the adoption resolution.
There's a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 I think
It's not, no. We gotta read it.
Director Webb has a question.
Director Webb?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and I had a question about this. There are currently some lawsuits pending about 30 Crossing, and I just wonder why we need to move ahead with this right now. I understand that it's less than 1 acre of land, but why the rush when the lawsuits are still out there and pending?
Mr. Moore or Mr. Honeywell?
Oh,
Mr. Honeywell?
Mayor, members of the board, Director Webb. These parcels are very small pieces of property located at the corners of intersections where the city has already actually granted a construction easement to the highway department for these properties. However, based on their designs and more detailed design as they move further in the project, the work that they're going to have to do in these locations require them to have ownership of this property versus an easement in order to do the work that they're going to be doing there. They've requested us to make these transfers of ownership, and that's why it's before y'all tonight.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would read item number 16.
A resolution to authorize the city manager to enter into a contract with Alta Planning and Design, Inc. in an amount not to exceed $99,961 for the Complete Streets Master Bike Study Plan and for other purposes.
Mayor, I have a question.
Director Hines.
Bruce or Mayor, where is the funding for the match coming from? Which fund? Is it coming from the street fund or from our?
It is coming from our street fund.
Thank you.
Director Adcock.
Yes. Am I understanding that we are paying them to have this service in our city? Or are they paying us?
Director Honeywell, will you explain the contract that the vote that Director Adcock is requesting?
And also, Director Honeywell, we've received information this week from some of the citizens about the fact that if young people are hurt on these bikes on our streets, say if a child takes their credit card from their father's billfold and uses it and hasn't.
Hold up.
It's
That's not the,
Director Adcock, there's two separate issues. What you're referring to is item 18.
I'm sorry, I can't hear you over here.
Director Adcock, you are asking a question about item 18. We are on item 16 regarding the bike study.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought we was on 18.
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Honeywell can wait then.
All right. There's been a motion and second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it.
Mayor, I think,
Mr. Moore?
and Tom, I don't think there was a motion.
I think they just read it. Yeah.
Right, it was just
There
read.
wasn't a motion.
Oh, I apologize. Is there a motion for item number 16?
So move.
There's a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read item 17.
An ordinance to amend Section 1 of the Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance Number 21,561 to remove the property located at 2901 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive from the demolition list, to declare an emergency and for other purposes. First reading.
Mayor,
Director Wright.
I'd like a presentation on the plan for this property.
And Mayor, while that's coming, in talking with Director Hendricks over the past few days, she wanted me to let the board know that she was now in favor of removing the property from the condemnation list.
With that being said, Director Wright, is there a need for a presentation?
No.
There's been a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
We have to read it two more times.
Got to read it two more times.
Move. Okay. Was that the
It's
suspension
an
of the
ordinance.
rules?
Yeah.
Oh, it's an ordinance today, not a resolution. All right, my apologies.
Move for
Director Hines.
move to suspend the rules and place this ordinance on second reading.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. Second reading.
An ordinance to amend Section 1 of the Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance Number 21,561 to remove the property located at 2901 Dr. Martin Luther King Drive from the demolition list, to declare an emergency. Second reading.
Move to suspend the rules and place on third and final reading.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, please say nay.
Nay.
Ayes have it. Third reading.
An ordinance to amend Section 1 of the Little Rock, Arkansas Ordinance Number 21,561 to remove the property located at 2901 Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Drive from the demolition list to declare an emergency. Third and final reading.
We've now had 3 readings. We have 4, all 5 are for this item.
We have one letter that
so-
was sent in against.
I would assume those 4 are fine with not being read. And the one against, I will read the one, Madam Clerk, would you read the one against?
Dear Mayor Scott and the City Board of Members, this letter is regarding the vacant building at 2901 Martin Luther King Drive, Little Rock, Arkansas. This building is just to the south of Greater Rose of Sharon Missionary Baptist Church. For years, this building has been deemed by the city unsafe, unsanitary, and a fire hazard. A warning notice from the City of Little Rock Department of Planning and Development dated September 30th, 2016, referring to an August 2nd, 2016 inspection stated, our inspection found a dilapidated building that this department has determined to be unsafe, unsanitary, a fire hazard, and is detrimental to the public welfare of the citizens of Little Rock. So as you can see, this situation didn't pop up overnight. For 4 years later, the only thing that has been done is the old back porch has been torn down and some boards placed over the windows. I ask you, does this make it safe? A summary report dated July 26, 2016, under location details states the following. The building has structural damage and is falling in on the south side of the building. On March 20th, 2018, Deacon James Duffy, the Secretary of Greater Rose of Sharon Deacon Ministry and trustee, appeared before the board in favor of demolition of this building. The Jeffreys were given until September to present a plan and come up with funding to pay for the repairs. September came, no plan and no means of funding, so it was put back on the demolition list, and the building is still standing barely. That this eyesore and health hazard has been allowed to exist too long. We know the Quapaw Historical Society is striving to have it removed from the demolition list. We know they have gathered signatures on a petition, and we know they are trying to preserve it as a historical site. Our question is, would they allow this building to remain in affluent Quapaw neighborhood? We know the answer is no. So why should we have to put up with it? We are right next door. If the Jeffreys cared about the building so much, they would have not allowed it to get into this condition. They have had ample time to make repairs. It is known that the Greater Rose of Sharon Missionary Baptist Church owns the property around the building. On the north side of the building, there is approximately 20 feet along the side of the building. On the south side, there is about 6 feet and 30 feet along the back of the Jeffreys building. We understand the plan is for an internet cafe. Our question is, where will the patrons park? Greater Rose of Sharon owns the parking lot behind the building and the driveway on the north side of the building. The only way they can access this very small parking they have is through the church property. Please note that at this time, the church is exploring the option of expanding the south side of our church to add an educational building in honor of our pastor and first lady after 30 years of service. We are afraid if they are given another extension, another excuse will come up at the end of the extension as it has before, and the situation will continue indefinitely. We ask you, Mayor Scott and the City of Little Rock board members, to please not give in to the pressure. By your own admission, in this building is unsanitary, unsafe, and a fire hazard. Please do not grant another extension, and please go ahead with the demolition of this building. We, the members of Greater Rose of Sharon NBC, are thanking you in advance for your kind consideration. Sincerely, Reverend Arthur L. Blood, Reverend Cedric Cross, Deacon James Duffy, and Deacon James Williams.
Thank you so much. We've now had 3 readings. We have a question from Director Richardson, or a comment.
Yes, a question. Bruce, can you restate Director Hendricks' comments to you during your conversation? I'm not sure I quite understood what you were saying about her conclusion or what she was recommending.
Director Richardson, I think she has visited with the current owners and the prospective owners and agrees with the plan of action moving forward. She also just called and said she had a recent conversation with the church and that they were supportive. I know this letter is dated October the 10th, but That was the message I just received from her, but,
So she's in favor of us removing this? Is
Correct.
Is that correct?
correct.
All right, thank you.
Director Adcock?
Yes, I would like to hear from the applicant about their funding and also from city staff about the condition of the building.
Director Director Collins?
Mr. Collins, has the condition of this building changed since staff had found it was in poor condition and needed to be demolished?
In general, the overall condition hasn't changed. At the time that we originally brought this before the city board, there was a back area that was burnt and uncovered. The changes that has happened, if you'll look at the pictures that we have, we went and took prior to the agenda meeting, they have resecured the building to date, and also on the back side and the windows. So that is the change of state as of today.
Is this the building since it's been secured?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much. Miss,
I'm sorry, I'm not finished.
oh, sorry about that.
Have you looked at the financing that they have for this building?
I have not seen the current finances as to be proposed by the potential buyer for any remediation. The last finances that I've received was, over 6 months ago in regards to Ms. Jeffries and their finances in the trust.
And was the funding sufficient to repair this building?
The funding was available to do the asbestos remediation, and it depended on the structural damage, partial structural repair, but it was not sufficient, in staff's opinion, to repair the entire building up to current code to occupiable space.
Have you talked to the church that since they have changed their support of this?
No, staff has not spoke with the church.
Okay, thank you.
Mayor, Director Hendricks is saying she was trying to.
Director Hendricks, I do apologize. We were going to continue to work with our technology team. I know we talked about that this evening. Director Hendricks?
She's muted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am.
I did talk with the pastor of the church and the deacon, many of the deacon board members today, and they agree that that the building is removed from the demolition list.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Is there anything else I need to say?
No, ma'am. Director Richardson?
Yes, Mayor, just in response to Jones' question, I think there seems to be some confusion with the progress on how we're going to move forward with this particular building. I think at one point it was suggested that the church was going to go through with the rehabbing of it, but I think the last time they were down there, I think they indicated that they're going to sell this to a potential buyer and that potential buyer would be responsible for that. So I think that's somewhat part of the confusion that I think we're seeing and dealing with. And Bruce or Tom, either one of you guys can clear me up on that. I did think I heard last time it came before they're going to sell it, but I think what John was referencing was the church themselves doing it. I don't know if the church is going to be potential buyers or not.
Hey, Mayor, is my mic still on?
Yes, ma'am.
I would like to share with Mr. Director Richardson that there is a potential buyer for the building. Ms. Jeffrey has agreed to accept that.
Yes, ma'am.
So I don't think anybody else on that board has anything else to do with it.
Thank you, Director Hendricks.
And I don't think the staff needs to talk to the pastor.
Yes, ma'am. Is there a call to the question?
Call the question.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please
Mayor,
read.
you got to vote.
There's an emergency clause.
There's a motion for the emergency
No,
clause?
no, no. You got to vote on the ordinance. You just closed debate with the question.
I thought we called it.
No.
We voted to call the question.
All right, I thought we went through the third reading. I apologize.
No,
We did go through the third
We read it
reading.
3
We
times.
called the question. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it.
Emergency
the
clause.
Now there's an emergency clause. Director Hines?
Move to adopt the emergency clause.
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Madam Clerk, if you would, please read item 18 for the first time.
An ordinance to permit dockless mobility technology within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Rev Code Section 32-463, 32-494, 32-496 to permit the use of dockless mobility units on public streets in central business districts or other designated areas, to establish certain standards for the use of such technology, to establish a business license fee and franchise fee for the city right-of-way, and for other purposes. First reading.
Is there a motion?
Motion to suspend the rules and place this on second reading.
Is there a second?
Second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay. Ayes have it. Second reading.
An ordinance to permit dockless mobility technology within the city of Little Rock, Arkansas to amend Little Rock, Arkansas Rev Code Section 32-463, 32-494, 32-496 to permit the use of dockless mobility units on public streets in central business districts or other designated areas, to establish certain standards for the use of this technology, to establish a business license fee and franchise fee for the city right-of-way. Second reading.
Mayor, I have a question before I make a motion on this.
Yes, sir. Director Hines?
Tom, on this, there's been a lot of pushback from the community on approving this. The question I have is, I couldn't remember, so this would be a new ordinance for us, correct?
Yes.
Okay, so we previously had, they came in under a administrative agreement to operate on a trial basis? Is that how we did it?
What happened originally is we had a memorandum of understanding that was extended a couple of times. In the meantime, the General Assembly had passed an act that set forth standards and conditions for these types of scooters to be used on public rights-of-way. And then we got hit with the coronavirus, and then they just kind of showed up recently, and the ordinance has come back now.
Okay, so my question is, if we do not pass this ordinance, those mobility operators would be able to operate by state statute without any regulation from us?
Director Hines, I wasn't really anticipating that question. As a general rule, local governments have control over their streets. You know, there's a few that are different, like Highway 10 and Cantrell, because that's a highway, and Interstate 30, which nobody would be allowed to ride a scooter on anyway. I think what would happen is you would have an argument made by a company that wished to come in and say, you can't do anything, you had your chance, and the statute's been put into place, so we're going to make this happen. And it would be sort of like what Uber did. Uber came in, we worked out an ordinance, and then they turned around and had a state statute passed, and we have absolutely nothing to do with them. So I think the answer to your question would be yes, because they're both transportation, they're both in this new digital age of transportation, and the General Assembly has given pretty broad authority for them to be there if the insurance is in place and things of that nature.
But it also, that statute also gives us the ability to regulate per this ordinance, correct?
Right. The statute
certain
gives us
boundaries.
some ability to do additional regulations, which we have done. For example, there's a $75 per scooter charge. In addition, there is an annual, or there is an initial franchise fee for the use of our rights-of-way. we keep them off of sidewalks unless an area has been deemed to be able to take scooters on sidewalks and there is appropriate signage in place. So we've done some things like that.
Okay, and the enforcement mechanism on people would be LRPD, would be our enforcement mechanism?
I think so. I don't think that these would be just violations. The most serious one's going to be without a helmet type of thing, and that is something I think that only a police
Well,
officer
I mean,
can enforce.
the biggest issue I've heard on them is operating on sidewalks and pedestrian collisions. So that's definitely something that needs to be enforced. Without a helmet, that's only going to apply to 16, 17-year-olds, I guess?
16 and under.
16 and under. Okay, so we determined that we can't include 17-year-olds?
The way that the statute was worded is we could impose stricter safety conditions unless they were otherwise established by law, and the state statute establishes 18.
And then, make sure I'm covering all the bases here. The last issue would be if you're, and it's my understanding, if you're operating a bicycle, a scooter, under the influence of anything, you can be cited for driving under the influence under Arkansas state statute and our DUI laws, correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay, all right, I just want to make sure. There was some conjecture about that, and I said, somebody was talking about how people were operating them that probably weren't exactly sober downtown, and so I just wanted everybody to be aware that is if there's a collision with a pedestrian, the same rules would apply if you're on a bicycle, a riding lawnmower. I think I've heard people getting DUIs driving a riding lawnmower down the street inebriated. So, yeah, I think that's my conundrum that I have. Based on that, I'm willing to pass this, but I'll defer to the rest of the board. If we want to defer this or go ahead forward with action, I'd love to hear from my fellow board members on what their feelings are. I would rather go ahead and regulate, since I don't want to have happen to us what happened with Uber, where essentially they've already gone around us, but we've got a little bit more say in this situation than we did with Uber and the Lyft folks. Thank you.
Thank you, Director Hines. Director Adcock, then Director Richardson, then Director Webb, then Director Peck.
Mr. Carpenter,
Yes, ma'am.
from what I'm looking at here, we have not designated the areas that these would be allowed. I was over on Asher recently, and they had some of them going up and down Asher. So do we know what areas these are going to be allowed?
Director Adcock, these will be allowed at the street pretty much throughout the city. The areas where they will not be allowed is on the sidewalks unless they're designated.
Okay, and do we know yet how much we're going to charge for this franchise?
I think that the amount is $10,000, but I don't remember. I know that Ms. Pruitt negotiated that provision. I think it's in the ordinance.
$10,000, I believe.
Can a police officer cite a 12-year-old child?
A police officer would have to take a 12-year-old to juvenile court for either a delinquency action or a juvenile in need of supervision.
Have we talked to our chief of police and our police department about the enforcement of this?
I have not talked to anybody recently. I know that when the scooters first appeared, we had numerous conversations with the police department about how to deal with them.
At a time that we've got violent crime on the uprise and everything else in this city going on, I see this as a real problem for our police department, adding this at this time. When would this start? I know they're over in front of the Metropolitan Housing today. There was 5 of them laying on the ground on the sidewalk, blocking the sidewalk for handicapped people to try to go up and down that sidewalk. So who's responsible for making sure they're standing up and they're not blocking sidewalks?
Director Adcock, this is not a docking approach in the ordinance. There are some places where you have to have docks where you actually put the scooter back in. This one doesn't have that. The advantage is that if a person wishes to ride a block to go just to ride a block for whatever reason, and they can leave the scooter there. They're not supposed to leave them on the street. We're supposed to be able to call and tell them to come pick them up. I have walked by places where they've been neatly parked next to each other, and I've walked by places where they haven't been. So I suspect that experience and the experiences around the country are going to be the same for some period of time.
Mr. Attorney, we do have a representative from Lime Scooter who's on the line listening. If Director Hines and/or Director Adcock would like to pose a question. But I would like to remind everyone that, as Mr. City Attorney has already shared, this law is already permissive for them to be on the streets. What we're trying to do is provide a permitting mechanism so we can receive income and have the ability to create a regulatory stance within it.
I would like to have the question answered, who's going to pick these up off the sidewalk, whether or not stopping somebody in a wheelchair from getting in and out of their automobile?
The Lime Scooter, if you would speak to that. It's my understanding that when a scooter is placed down, it is there to be picked up by another location, and then at the end of each evening, they are then transported back to be redistributed the following morning. Mr. Lime Representative?
Yeah, that is correct. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to that. I'm sorry for not introducing myself first. My name is Nico Probst. I'm the Director of Government Relations for Lime. And firstly, wanted to say thank you to the city for allowing us to operate for the past year. You know, we did come in with an agreement, and I think a lot of the approach from the city was to test these devices and pilot the use case of these. And to date, we have seen just an incredible use in the city of Little Rock, and we really appreciate the partnership. To the director's question, anytime a complaint is reported about a specific device, our team is sent out immediately to resolve that. We typically resolve any issues within 30 minutes. One thing that and I did put together a data report that I'm not entirely sure if it was shared with the directors, but I will be certain to send that around following this meeting. One of the things that we will be doing this next iteration of the program, if we're fortunate to continue operations, is actually setting some designated parking locations throughout the city, where we will paint some small signage that initiates users to realize that this is the location to park these devices and creates more of a habitual parking environment for these. We will also list those parking locations in the app. And if there are any locations that anyone has identified that are consistent problem areas, we are able to remove those as parking locations, both from our operations, but we can also prevent users from parking them through our geofencing technology. So we really look to our city partners for any feedback, any issues that are being raised in specific locations, and then we can address those in real time.
Director Hines has a question. Well, actually, Director Hines, I'm sorry. I want to make sure we're in the correct order. I do apologize, Director Hines.
And then myself.
Let me go back to the order. We had Director Adcock. It's actually Director Webb, Peck, then Wright. Director Webb.
Is it, I thought Director Richardson, was he next? I think before me.
Oh, I'm sorry. I apologize, Director Richardson. Thank you, Director Webb. Trying to keep up with your hands in the phone at the same time. We're going to try to find some technology that we can see the hands raised that way.
Thank you, Director Webb. Mayor, my question is, I think Joan made reference to them being used all over the place. My question and the concern some of my constituents have is, will they be available throughout the city rather than being available in just certain parts of the city? That's the question I'm hearing from some of my constituents, that we're going to selectively make these available in certain parts of the city. And can I get somebody to refute that so that we know that they're going to be available throughout the whole city?
We are happy to add new deployment locations. When we started the program, we were operating a very small amount of vehicles in the city intentionally to initiate riders to them, allow the residents of the city to sort of get used to the program. And quite honestly, since our return post-pandemic, we saw a very big uptick in ridership, which I think conveys that folks are looking for alternative forms of mobility, obviously looking for something that's socially distanced and open air, and it's a good alternative, I think, to rideshare and alleviate some folks' concerns about public transit right now. So in the next iteration of the program, based on the ordinance that you are all reviewing today, we would apply for a certain amount of vehicles, and our hope is to apply for a pretty decent amount, a little bit more than we had initially operated. And the hope is then, yes, we would absolutely spread to other locations throughout the city. We certainly have been concentrated in some specific neighborhoods, but would love any feedback from the directors about locations that you'd like us to add coverage to. One other piece I should mention, and we have been promoting this throughout the duration of our operations, is that we do have an equity program in place as well that allows a significant greater than 50% discounted rate for any individual that qualifies for a federal, local, or state means needs assistance program. And then we also have capabilities for folks who are unbanked or without a smartphone to access our devices as well.
And my other question is, I know you made reference that we don't have docking stations available throughout the whole city, but are there instructions in terms of what to do if you don't have a dock station available? Are there instructions for the riders? And then more importantly, instructions for us so that we can make knowledge-based decisions and knowledge-based recommendations to our constituents?
Yes, to the first point, the first question about instructions, any user who signs up in the app goes through a tutorial of where to ride the devices, the bike lanes where they exist, not on the sidewalk. And then additionally, we send constant communications to our riders, both through our emails and our in-app messages. We also just invited any rider who has only completed 1 or 0 rides in the city to what we call a digital first ride academy, which is essentially sort of a driver's ed course for folks to get training on how to utilize the scooters properly. And we talk about proper parking behavior. And in the app, it does direct folks to not impede ADA rights, of course, park in the furniture zone of the sidewalk or next to a bike rack where it exists. And then one additional piece that we have conveyed, and something that we'll be looking to do in the next program too, is add additional signage in some of the areas that have been raised as a concern of where sidewalk riding has occurred a lot. That sort of directs folks in more visible language to not utilize the sidewalks and encourage them to ride in the roadway or the bike lane.
So is there a way that you can get that information to the board members in terms of those policies and?
Yes, absolutely.
So we can be better informed.
Yep. I absolutely will do. I apologize. We put a data report together, and I will make sure that all of the board gets it.
That's fine. Thank you, Director Webb. Thank you too, sir.
Thank you. Next, we have Director Webb, then Director Peck, then Director Hines, then Director Compuris.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And to follow up on Director Hines, who had a lot of good questions, and I have gotten a lot of complaints about these, and I am not as familiar with the state law as I obviously need to be. I don't know that we have every single thing in this ordinance that we can have, also based on some of Tom's remarks. And I would like to propose that we defer this for 2 weeks so we can make sure that we have as much regulation in here as possible.
Is that a motion?
What would deferral do?
Director Webb, is that a motion?
Yes, sir.
A second.
There's a motion second. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, please say nay.
Present.
Ayes have it. We'll now move forward with item number 19 as Director Linehan comes to the podium.
Mayor, while she's doing that, I know that you had at least 4 other people who wanted to ask questions, and if they could send them to the appropriate office, I don't know if that's your office or Bruce's or mine or all of us, we can try to get those answered also before 2 weeks from now.
Yes, if
right.
board members have a question in regards to both the state law and the ordinance, please direct those questions to myself, Mr. Moore, and our city attorney, and we'll ensure that you get those responses back.
Mayor, if you could have the gentleman from Lyme, the governmental affairs, give me a call. I've got some technology questions for him that probably I could answer offline with him. I don't know if he's still on the line, but.
Yes, is the Lyme representative still online? Mr. Director Hines will make sure that he gets in touch with you.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Moore, if you will remind the when we get with our team meeting, we'll ensure that that communication between Director Hines and the line government relation person happens. Thank you so much, Mr. Moore. Before we get started, if you notice, I've been trying to expedite this meeting as quickly as possible, and the reason why is wanted to allow for enough time on this evening. As you know, we've been going through the journey of our budgeting process in the wake of COVID-19 and its financial impact on our finances. We know we've had to amend our 2020 budget twice, once in April, another a few weeks ago. And so we've been going through that journey. Last week, we offered for review the 2021 revenue projections. Tonight, we will present the 2021 proposed budget expenditures. Board members received around 5:30 p.m. Via email. So every board member, particularly the board members that are visiting with us via video conferencing, has received in their inbox the budget expenditures for the 2021 proposed budget. So we could all walk through this together with Director Linehan. I want to also just take time to thank Director Linehan and her entire team, and our entire budget team, which includes Director Linehan, her finance team, Mr. Moore, and myself, and our collective teams together have spent hours upon hours and weeks upon weeks to get to this point, to propose. Now what you have in conjunction with last week's revenue projections, you have this week's proposed revenue expenditures. In this 52 or 53-page document is what we would call the proposed budget. So you will see embedded into these 52, 53 pages, both revenue projections for 2021 as well as budget expenditures to create the comprehensive budget before you. The plan, and stress the word the plan, is to share with you tonight this budget process. Allow Director Linehan to go through in great detail this process. Then we will have opportunity for Q&A regarding this process after she gets through with the presentation. Then the board will have, for another, I guess, close to 2 weeks, have the opportunity to review this budget on next week, next Tuesday, during our agenda meeting. It will be in ordinance form. Again, for the board members to continue to review it. We'll go into the Thanksgiving holiday weekend, and then it'll be scheduled for a vote on December the 1st, I believe, on December the 1st. And so in total, we'll have close to 2.5 weeks for review. Again, that's the goal, that's the plan. We know that budgeting is never something we want to rush. We want to ensure that everyone has all the information as possible. And so today's November 17th, and so the plan is to review, ask questions, and work towards a cohesiveness between November the 17th and December 1st. That is our goal date. As you know, we were able to get it done early last year. We hope to do that again this year. And we know this is a team effort with the board as being policymakers with our moral document of the budget. But I'm happy to present, well, Director Linehan is going to present a balanced budget in the wake of COVID-19 for 2021. Director Linehan.
Thank you, Mayor. I also want to make sure that everyone is aware, the public, that this is also going to be posted online first thing in the morning. It'll be on the city's front page of the city's website. So we'll go to the, let me see if I can get it.
Director Linehan, if you would, please bring the mic closer to you and speak as loud as possible.
Okay. Can everyone hear me? Okay, this does not seem to be advancing. Oh, thank you. Still no. Allie, it's still not advancing. Okay. All right, if you'll just advance to the first slide, please. The next slide. Okay. So the first section of this presentation will be with respect to the personnel cost assumptions and the other expenditures that are applicable to all of the city's funds. So on the next slide, you'll see that included in the budget for all of the funds is the continuation of step and grade progression for those union and union eligible employees that have a step and grade. That includes the IAFF, the International Association of Firefighters, the Fraternal Order of Police, our AFSCME union and union eligible employees, and our 911 communications positions. There are no other salary adjustments included in this presentation in the budget. On the next slide, as you're aware, our health insurance benefits will include a renewal of the fully insured coverage with United Healthcare. There is an increase of 7.5% included in personnel costs that's associated with the increased premium, but that increased cost is offset by the health insurance holiday premium savings from December, and that is reflected in the revenue presentation that we gave last week in our transfers in as a carryover. There is no increase to premium cost for employees in 2021, and there will still be buy-up options for lower deductibles and co-pays available to the employees at the same rate as what was charged in 2020. So on the next slide, you'll see the pension rates that are in effect for the various plans. The ones that will be effective as of January 1st, 2020 are the fire lot fee pension contribution, which is set by the state. It is currently at 23.5%, and that will remain unchanged. It's at the state maximum. The police lot fee pension contribution will be 23.23%, which is a 1% increase from last year. Last year was 22.23, and again, that is set by the state. The lot fee contributions for police and fire are partially offset by state pension turnback funds that are included in the budget as intergovernmental revenues. So that was in our revenue presentation last week. Our non-uniform employees are in the non-uniform defined benefit plan, and the city contribution for that plan is 9%, and that is unchanged. In addition, our judges and court clerks participate in the APERS plan. That rate is set at the state, and that is 15.32% and is unchanged. And then we have one judge that is still covered by the ADJRS plan, and the contribution for that is 38.99%. Thank you. Okay. So the next is our closed pension plans. We have plans that were for those that were hired prior to 1982, and those plans are closed to new members. And our closed police and fire pension plans are now administered by LOPFI. They are covered by, the contributions are offset by a dedicated 1 mil property tax levy for each plan. And then in addition, the city contributes $500,000 in sales tax to each of the plans. And then there are other dedicated fines and fees for the plans that are set in city code. So the closed police pension plan LOPFI will bill us a monthly contribution of $333.185, which is just under $4 million annually. And then the city contributes additional revenues, those dedicated revenues above, to the maximum that is collected. And so the estimated total contribution is $7,808,000, and the additional $3.8 million is utilized to pay down that unfunded liability. The same is true of our fire pension plan. The closed fire pension plan, LOPFI has set the billing rate at $268,268 per month, which is approximately $3.2 million. The city makes the additional contribution from those dedicated revenues to pay down the unfunded liability. and it's anticipated the total contribution will be $6,776,116. On our next slide, we also have a closed defined benefit plan. That plan has decreasing members, and the contribution that is actuarially determined is decreasing by $85,000 to $500,000. Other personnel assumptions that are applicable to all funds, we have an other post-employment benefit contribution, which is for COBRA and retiree health benefits primarily. The actuarial cost of that will decrease just under $300,000 to $1,188,500. There's also a judges and clerks liability for a previous plan that has an unfunded liability, and that is set at $185,000 annually, no change to that. And then based on experience, our workers' compensation will decrease $412,000 to $2,635,000. And all of these benefits that I'm mentioning are allocated to all of the funds based on where the member employees are paid, or were paid if they are already retired. So on our next slide, I'm going to go through the changes in staffing by funds. The first column represents what was included in our 2019 amended budget. Then you'll also see our 2020 adopted budget and the 2021 draft budget. So there are no changes in the total personnel for executive administration, the board of directors, community programs, the city attorney, or any of our 3 district courts. The first department that will have a change in staffing is finance. We have 3 additional employees. That includes a deputy director of finance operations, a senior accountant, and a small business coordinator position that were added during 2020 to facilitate compliance with new accounting standards and to improve minority and small business training, development, and participation in city contracts. And then in addition, we have a senior budget analyst position that would be added in 2021 once we finish implementing our new budget software, but that is offset by the reduction of a fiscal systems administrator position. In our human resources department, we have 2 employees that were actually added during 2020, and those are 2 new FOIA positions to help facilitate responses to the Freedom of Information Act requests. In information technology, we have 2 additional positions. These are new business applications analyst positions that were added to consolidate and manage the various Infor Lawson modules across the city. One of those positions was transferred from the finance department, as just mentioned. In planning and development, there is 1 new position. It's a development manager position that was added in 2020 to facilitate permitting and planning activities for economic development opportunities. There are no changes in the general fund for housing and neighborhood programs, the Public Works Building Services team, Parks and Recreation, golf, or the Jim Daly Fitness Center. The zoo has added 1 animal keeper position during 2020. The fire department in the 2021 budget will add a civilian analyst position to manage accreditation activities and to free up the uniform position that is currently covering that for operations. In the police department, there are 4 additional non-uniform employees. 1 was a police media relations position. There were 2 telephone reporting positions added to take reports from citizens of activity, and then 1 office assistant was added during 2020. There were no changes to the uniform position count. However, 7 of the officers in the latest 2020 recruit class will be partially funded by a COPS grant that will offset approximately 72% of their cost. So in total, there are 14 additions to the general fund, which will bring the full-time headcount from 1,690 to 1,704. Okay. On the next slide, we'll go through the special project and grant fund positions. These are funded positions that are they're typically limited service positions, and they're funded by grants for the period of time covered by the grant or by a special project allocation. So there's no change to the grant-funded positions in executive administration. Community programs, there was one special project position added. It was a positive intervention position that was added during 2020. No changes in finance. In human resources, there's a wellness coordinator position that has been funded by a portion of the health insurance holiday premium savings. In the housing, there was an additional grant-funded position added. And in police, we have 7 grant-funded positions. 6 of those are victim services specialists that were added during 2020 with a grant, and then there's a social worker position that will be added in 2021 utilizing burn grant funds. On the next slide, the funding for our other funds. Our waste disposal fund will have 1 additional employee. It's a solid waste inspector. Public Services Street Fund will have a support service specialist that was added during 2020. And our Vehicle Storage Division will have 1 storage attendant position that was added. So in total, for our full-time authorized employees, we will go from 2,164 to 2,191, which is a total of 27 positions. So let's see. On our next slide, you'll see this is a graph depicting where the full-time staffing is. So in the all of the funds, 54.2% of city full-time staffing is police and fire. 16.7% is for solid waste and street services. 8.8% are for parks and zoo activities. 4.5% for housing and neighborhood programs. 3.5% for fleet and vehicle storage, and all other positions make up 12.4% of the city's full-time staffing. On the next slide, again applicable to all funds, the fleet department manages the cost of fuel and provides maintenance and repairs to all of our vehicles. So the cost of fleet labor, fuel, vehicle insurance, vehicle maintenance, and other expenses are allocated to departments based on the number of vehicles assigned, maintenance schedules, and actual fuel usage. So our parts expenses are forecast to decline due to better inventory management and streamlining of the fleet using similar models across the city. And also our fleet replacement program, which has taken many of the older vehicles out of service. The fuel rate per gallon, which includes a 14-cent markup, which covers the labor and the supplies in the fuel acquisitions division, is budgeted at $2.09 a gallon for unleaded and $2.19 for diesel, which compares to 2020 rates of $2.30 and $2.60. So we'll see a pretty significant decline in our fuel cost. On the next slide is a summary of our outside agency highlights. We will have a decrease in our Rock Region Metro funding of $341,616 from what was included in the adopted 2020 budget. The total funding level will be $9.8 million, of which 7.8 or 80% is reflected in the general fund, and $2 million, consistent with the previous year's allocation, will be reflected in the street fund. There is an increase in the Pulaski County Jail funding of 3%, which is approximately $74,000. This will bring the total funding up to just over $2.5 million, of which $2.4 million will be reflected in the general fund, and $160,000 will be paid from a local jail fee that is applied to tickets. That is actually a decrease from what has been contributed by the local jail fee before, because our tickets and all are down, and so there's less funds available from that. This also restores the 120-day funding reductions that were included in the budget amendment associated with the Art Center, the Museum of Discovery, and the Downtown Partnership, and it includes an enhancement of Art Center funding. On the debt service for our short-term notes, the debt service and the bond agent fees will be $4,258,645 in 2021. $954,000 of that will be reimbursed from our 3/8 cent fund, which represents the principal portion of the 2016 note that was taken out to fund the fire truck and the completion of Station 24. That note will be retired in 2021. It's the last short-term financing note that advanced those 3/8 cent projects, and it's time to conclude at the same time that the 3/8 cent tax concludes. Debt service overall will decrease by approximately $1.25 million from 2020, and that reflects the retirement of the $5.9 million note that was issued in 2015. So now I'm going to go through just those things that are applicable to the general fund. On the first slide is a summary of the revenue forecast that was presented last week. So the first column, 2019 actual, that's the actual general fund revenues in 2019, which were at $218,055,000. Our 2020 original budget was $212,125. Part of that was the decrease in transfers in when Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau retired the note on the Cromwell building, and the city retired a note that had 3/8 cent proceeds transferred in. And then we decreased our sales tax growth forecast because we had some unusual receipts in 2019 that we didn't anticipate would continue. Our 2020 amended budget was taken down by $8 million to $204,039,000 due to the impact of COVID on the budget. The 2021 draft increases the budget to $210,000, which is a $6 million increase from the, or excuse me, $210 million, an increase of $6 million from our amended budget, but still $2,024,000 below our 2020 original budget. So the change from the original budget is a reduction of 1%, and we're still about $8 million or 3.6% below the 2019 actual results. The next slide is just a repeat from last week, which shows the breakdown of the general fund revenues, with about 51% coming from sales tax, 15% from property tax, 14% from franchise fees, which together make up 80% of our general fund revenues. And again, the total revenue budget is $210,100,969. So some of the expenditure highlights for the general fund. In our personnel budget, there will be an increase of $1,384,145 to the personnel budget. That includes the net impact of the COPS grant reimbursement of approximately $325,000 that, as I mentioned before, offsets 72% of the cost of 7 of the recruits that were hired in 2020. We're also increasing our vacancy savings allocation from $5.5 million to $6 million, and that's because in our 2020 budget, we had achieved that $5.5 million number by September 30th. And again, the vacancy savings is a reduction to the net personnel budget, and it's due to the turnover that we experience in our positions throughout the year. With most of our positions being in police and fire, it obviously takes longer to fill those positions. We wait for the next recruit class, and so during that time, there is some salary savings when those positions aren't filled. We also have regular retirements and new hires throughout the year. So during those periods when those positions are vacant, there's savings generated from not paying those salaries and benefits. On the next slide, this is an overall highlight of the maintenance expenditures, the changes. There will be a net increase of $134,520. Of that, $94,404 is in our executive administration division for performance and innovation. That's Melissa Bridges' division that provides the government transparency portal, the data platform that is used. And this is not really an increase. It was previously funded, though, in a pilot program special project. So it's an addition to the general fund. In finance, there'll be an increase of $41,900, and this is attributed to the Lawson Enterprise Resource Planning System Maintenance Contract, Office 365, our CAFR online maintenance, which is the software used to write our comprehensive annual financial report, and then one of the new governmental accounting standards that we will have to implement is the new lease standard, and so we're purchasing some special software for that. Human resources will have a $96,000 increase. This is associated with the employee training platform called Learn, and also with the NeoGov hiring and onboarding annual maintenance, which has been previously implemented, and it's an increase to the maintenance cost. In the information technology department, there's an increase of $129,716 in maintenance, and this is for the WebEx that's been added, the Zoom, the MiFis, and all the other technology that's been implemented for teleworking due to COVID-19 that is not already picked up in other departments. In the planning division, there's a $42,500 increase, and this is associated with the planning permitting software, Lawson software module. In the river market, there's a decrease of $20,000 in building maintenance. And at the zoo, there'll be a decrease in deferred building and exhibit maintenance of $250,000. Our contracts cost will increase approximately $350,000. That's the net increase. You're going to see some additions and some reductions here. In executive administration, the total increase is $345,000. $181,800 of that is associated with the property and EDP insurance renewal. $150,000 is being set aside in the case that we move forward with an election in 2021. Janitorial services for our Fire Training Academy and 311 is $20,000. All other departments, there's a net reduction of $6,426, or all other, contracts in the executive administration have a decrease of $6,427. In our Parks and Recreation Department, there's a net increase of $184,000. $160,000 of that is for the upgraded service that was implemented at the community centers for the Comcast. It was implemented during COVID-19 for remote learning. And then we've also implemented Wi-Fi at our park pavilions, and that ongoing maintenance will be $24,000. The river market will have a net decrease of $173,000. The reductions are in basically all areas. You'll see as we move to the summaries by department and all, the forecast for the river market is really planning operations for about 6 months of the year, while the Convention and Visitors Bureau is marketing the river market for potential sale to a buyer. All other departments, there's a net decrease of $6,860 in our contract cost. So within the general fund, I already told you the assumptions on the fleet cost, but the general fund departments will enjoy a decrease of $350,470 associated with fleet. We are planning for the third phase of the 4-year replacement plan for our fire turnouts, and we will decide whether or not to include that in a short-term financing note to be issued in 2021, or whether there'll be sufficient 3/8 interest earnings to offset that. And as in the past several years, the budget does include a $1 million contingency allocation for potential revenue or expenditure variations. So this slide shows you kind of a summary of everything I've just mentioned to you. Again, starting with the 2019 actual budget and working away across to the 2021 budget. And I've also presented the change from 2020 amended budget to 2021 and the change from the 2020 original budget. And in this year, the change from the 2020 original budget is the one that we should really focus on. We had significant reductions in 2020, some of which you'll see on the personnel line, the $15.8 million. That's attributed first to the allocation of $5.5 million in vacancy savings that as it's realized, it's net with the actual personnel cost in each department. It also includes the $7.8 million reduction that we had for the fire EMT salaries when those were transferred to our grant fund for the CARES reimbursement. It includes the reduction we made in our April 1st adjustment to for the 120-day reduction of our part-time personnel that were not working during the first several months of COVID. So when you put all those things together and you combine line 1 with line 11, the net increase in personnel from the amended 2020 budget is a little over $10 million. But when you look at that from our 2020 original budget, it's $884,000 net change. It's $1.3 million in the increase in personnel cost, offset partially by the $500,000 reduction on line 11 in our vacancy savings. And then, as we went through those previous slides, you'll see on line 3, the $350,470 reduction to fleet. You'll see the $134,520 increase to repairs and maintenance, which was identified by division previously. The increase in contracts was identified by division. The debt service reduction that I showed you a moment ago. And then we will go into detail on our, actually our outside agency funding, our debt service, and our transfers out on the next slide. Again, I want to highlight that this is still a reduction of $2,024,284 from our original 2020 budget. So this is a breakdown in the percentage of the expenses that you saw on the previous slide. 76% of the cost is in personnel. That's net of the vacancy savings, with less than 10% in each of the other categories. The personnel plus the net of the vacancy savings added to the outside agency funding and our transfers out represent 85.5% of our general fund expenditures. So now we'll talk about the outside agency support that will be included in the general fund budget. As I mentioned previously, the Rock Region Metro funding will decrease by $341,000. Part of this is due to anticipated COVID-19 reimbursements that they will receive from the federal government. They receive offsets of some of the expenditures for safety measures and then also some lost fare revenue. On line 2, you see the increase in our regional detention center support. While the contract cost is only going up about $74,000, the portion in the general fund will go up $172,000, and that's due to the reduced availability of the fine revenue that helps to make up that difference. And then the items denoted by a C to the far right show the 120-day funding reductions that we had made in the amended budget. Those have been restored back to the 2020 original level. And then there's an additional contribution of $100,000 for the Arts Center. On the next slide, our debt service. Again, this is going to decrease $1,246,000 due to the retirement of a note, and $954,000 of the $4.2 million in expense will be offset by a revenue transfer from our 3/8 cent fund for the principal portion on the note to advance construction of the 12th Street, or excuse me, of the Fire Station 24. So now transfers out. We'll have transfers to special projects of $6,827, and I'll go through that in detail. We'll have a transfer to the street fund of $194,000. This is consistent with previous funding to provide for parking enforcement that occurs in the street fund. It comes from general revenue. And then, as noted previously, there's a $1 million contingency allocation, and our grant match will be $230,000, and I'll talk about those in detail. So this slide is a little bit hard to see. I apologize for that. But this is the summary of special projects and the changes from the 2020 original budget to the 2020 amended budget and the 2021 recommended budget. So on line 1, you'll see that in the amended budget, we included a transfer out of $4.5 million to offset the COVID expenses that we incurred. And so, of course, that will not continue in 2021. So there's a decrease of $4.5 million associated with that. For children, youth, and families, we originally allocated $4,750,000 in 2020. With the various amendments, that was taken down to $1,943,879 in the amended budgets. This will bring that back up partially to $3,372,000. So there's an increase from the amended budget of $1,428,000, but it's still a decrease of $1,378,000 from the 2020 original funding level. If you look at note B there, this reduction, $378,000 of that is intended to be a reduction to the community schools model allocation that was made, or the community schools model allocation, and that's because there's, like other community programs projects, we were not able to do as much in 2020, and so we have some funding left over. And then it also anticipates a reduced $1 million to the other programs. So with the $3,372,000 that we're setting aside or budgeting, and the $2.7 million in carryover funds that are still remaining as of October 31st, there will be $6.2 million available for programming from now through the end of 2021. So again, the reason that that reduction is lower is because of the amount of funds that we still have carried over because of reduced programming associated with COVID. The items that are marked with a C, there are still some sufficient funds remaining from our prior year allocations. Those include the Little Rock Residency Incentive Program on line 12, the Sister Cities allocation because those activities were not held due to COVID in 2020. And then I think that covers those. And then the other project that will not receive funding in 2021 would be the census project because the census has been completed. And then the items marked with an E are things that were reinstated from 2020 amendments. So, for example, the Sustainability Summit, that was one of the budget reductions we made. We anticipate that that will occur in 2021. And then also the Tennis Open, we're hoping that that can occur in 2021. Most of the other allocations are at consistent levels with the past. Next is our grant match transfers. So in 2020, we set aside $455,790 in 2020. In 2021, it'll be $230,000. However, in addition to that $230,000, there are grants that have been awarded that we have already got the match set aside, the $788,000 that will also be expended as they carry over into 2021. And those include the Outdoor Recreation Grant, the River Mountain Bike Project, the Planning Grant, the Heritage Grant, the Metropolitan Transportation Alternative Grant, Recreational Trail Grant, Stop Violence Against Women, Assistance to Firefighters, and so on. So the things that we have included for 2021 up above, the Choice Neighborhoods Grant, which this is be a multi-year grant. There would be $50,000 that would be set aside in each year if we were able to achieve that grant. The assistance to firefighters would be combined with the previous allocation to potentially apply for a SAFER grant, the 21st Century Learning Program, and Federal Grants Advisory. So on this slide, this is now taking that same information that you saw by category, that was by personnel and supplies and repairs and contracts, and it breaks it down by department. So again, the same numbers at the bottom circled: 210 million, 100,000 in expenditures, $2 million decrease from what our 2020 original budget was, and you'll see the changes in the far right column. So in executive administration, for example, we've already talked about what most of those decreases are. The outside agency contributions are included on that line. The debt service is included, the vacancy savings, the decrease in transfers out, net of the increase in maintenance and the increase in contracts. All of the total of everything else that we haven't specifically identified is a decrease of $61,145. As you go down the line, you'll be able to closely match the increases with the staffing additions that you saw on the previous slides. So for example, in the finance department, that reflects the 3 additional employees. It also includes the increased maintenance and some operating expenses for the 2 new divisions, the reporting and compliance and the small business office. In human resources, that's the 2 FOI positions that we talked about. In information and the maintenance increase that we've already discussed. Information technology, that's the increased positions, the increased repairs or maintenance that we talked about for the contracts, and so on. And all of the divisions that have vehicles, some of the reason that the increases are so small, because there is increased benefit cost with the health insurance, there's increased benefit cost with the step and grade calculations, but that's offset in many cases by the reductions to the fuel and fleet services allocations. So moving on down the list, remember planning had an additional position, housing had an additional position. Parks and housing have both increased their budgets for the increase in minimum wage for part-time employees. And then, as I mentioned before, the river market costs, which were estimated for us by Little Rock Convention and Visitors Bureau, are estimates for about half of the year as it's being marketed. The zoo decrease is a net of the increase in personnel cost attributed to the new position, partially offset by the reduction in maintenance that you saw previously. Fire, we have the increase in the position. There are increases associated with step and grade, but there's significant reductions associated with the fuel allocations in that budget. Same is true with police. There's significant increases associated with step and grade, personnel cost, health insurance, and the increase to the pension rate, but that's offset by decreases in fuel contracts and some of the incentives that we've previously had for the sick leave incentives, which have been fully exhausted. Okay, so our next slide shows us the breakdown by department. So here you'll see that our police department makes up 38% of the budget. The fire department makes up 26% of the budget. And combined with our executive administration, they're at 78, those three divisions make up 78% of the general fund budget. And again, executive administration includes the debt service, the outside agency funding, and the transfers out, in addition to the actuarially determined benefit contributions that we discussed toward the beginning of the presentation. So in summary on the general fund, you'll see that our revenues and transfers in will equal oh, I've got the wrong thing circled, I apologize. It should be on the 2021 draft budget, $210,100,000. The expenditures will total $210,100,000, which again is a decrease to both revenues and expenditures of $2,024,284 for a balanced general fund budget. Now we'll go through our other funds. So our street fund revenue forecast was presented last week. This is the same thing that you saw. As a refresher, we're anticipating a reduction in, it's a net reduction in property tax from the original 2020 budget, but our 2020 budget originally had 4% growth based on the estimate we had received from the county. Our amendment took that down by 1%. We're now increasing it by 2.5% based on information from the county, but the net impact is a decrease of $40,000. Our state turnback funds are decreasing, and that's primarily associated with the usage, the road user fee per gallon, and so on. So the revenue budget for the street fund as presented last week is $21,279,119. And you'll see the expenditure budget is the same, $21,279,119. So, as noted in the personnel highlights, our AFSCME personnel, and there are many of them in the street fund, they will continue with step and grade progression, but those increases are offset by the reduction to the workers' compensation premiums and by the street fund share of some of the pension and OPEB and things that we discussed earlier. The fleet cost reductions were also discussed in detail on previous slides, and the impact to the street fund is a decrease of $251,769. The $100,000 increase in contracts is associated with continuation of an infrastructure study and the revision to the stormwater manual and maintenance, or stormwater manual ordinance. The transfers out that are included in the street fund budget are included on page 38. The street fund utilizes funds. They have a special project within their fund where they set aside funds for specific items. So vehicle and equipment replacement is one of the top things at $1,250,000, which is a $350,000 increase over the previous year. There is an annual administrative overhead allocation and savings from Johnson Control energy efficiency measures that were put in place several years ago. And then a continuation of the reentry sidewalk program and right-of-way program. The set aside from last year for the school zone flasher connectivity system will not happen again this year. It's already been set aside for that. And then the health insurance premium savings will not be set aside again or transferred out in 2021. Instead, it's reflected as revenue as we move that in to offset the cost of the health insurance increase for street fund. The next slide is on our waste disposal fund. Again, we went through these revenues last week. The revenue forecast is $23,671,871. One of the changes was the increase in sanitation fees associated with the increase in the recycling contract. And when we flip the page, you'll see the increase in contract expenditures associated with that. So in the waste disposal fund, we kind of had the same scenario. that we did with the street fund. We have the step and grade increases for our AFSCME personnel, but that's more than offset by the decreases in some of the actuarially determined costs and the workers' compensation premiums due to experience. The big reduction of $749,000 from the original budget is the fleet. The waste disposal fund does not get their fuel from the fleet fund. They use the fleet fund contract, but they purchase their fuel directly. So they're going to enjoy that same decrease. The increase of $663,000 on the contract line is a combination of the pass-through for the recycling contract. And if you look in the first column at the 2019 cost, and then look at what we had budgeted in 2020, you'll see that we had underestimated the contract cost in the waste disposal fund. So the remaining of that portion of that adjustment is to true that up to what their actual contract needs are. Likewise, on the depreciation and amortization line, because the waste disposal fund is considered an enterprise fund or a business type fund, you don't see cash distributions for their equipment purchases. Instead, you see depreciation and amortization of equipment over its estimated useful life to match with the revenues that are generated from people that are utilizing their services. So we had overestimated the depreciation. I've been explaining that each month in our financial report, and so we've trued that up now to what we believe. It will still be higher than the 2019 actual budget because of additional side loaders and rear loaders that have been placed in service, but it will be down from what we had originally estimated in 2020, which was overstated. So in total, the waste disposal fund is also balanced with revenues and expenditures of $23,671,871. Now, the waste disposal fund does intend to utilize approximately $3.7 million to add additional side loaders, rear loaders, and landfill equipment. And there's also $305,000, the principal portion of their debt service payment. And again, due to the accounting standards, those don't show up on the income statement. They're reductions or they're increases in assets or reduction in a liability on the balance sheet. But those costs are offset primarily by the depreciation and amortization, which is a non-cash expense, and by the closure and post-closure care cost allocation. So on the next slide, you'll see the transfers out that are included in our waste disposal fund budget. So there will be a continuation of the funding for the environmental youth programs. There's an administrative overhead allocation for the street and general funds, and continuation of the anti-litter programs that have been in place. And now on to the fleet fund. So again, we went through the revenues in detail last week. The revenues, we're expecting decreases. The fleet fund bills our other internal departments for fuel, for parts, for repairs, and you see decreases in all of those, which correspond then to the decreases in the expense that we've already discussed on the other funds. On the expenditure side, the fleet fund, the decrease of $445,000 in supplies and of $273,197 in contracts on line 6. Those are primarily associated with the vehicle parts and some of the outside services for engine replacement, drive lines, hydraulic systems, and the like. And again, those are decreasing because the fleet has been renewed. We've taken a lot of the older vehicles out of service, and so we're not experiencing as much cost or as much need for repair. The decrease in fuel has already been discussed on a previous slide, and that shows up on line 3. And then the decrease in the transfers out of $682,000. In the 2020 amended budget, We added that transfer, which went to pay for the upfit for our public safety vehicles. When we buy the public safety cars, they're basically regular cars. And so the upfit cost is things like the light kit, the sirens, the communications, all the things that go into the car to make it an actual police car. And so the Fleet Fund was able to utilize accumulated resources and set aside funds for the upfit of those vehicles in 2020, but that will not be available in 2021. So the Fleet Fund was balanced with revenues and expenses at $13,390,000. So now on to our Vehicle Storage Fund. This fund, again, the revenues were discussed in detail last week, so I won't spend a lot of time on them. The forecasted budget is $1,759,847, which again is a decrease from our 2020 original budget, but an improvement from the amended budget. Overall, we still expect for storage fees and wrecker fees and auction sales to still be down slightly due to the impact of COVID and fewer vehicles that have been on the road. On the expenditure slide, you'll see the addition of the fleet services attendant. Again, this is step and grade for AFSCME employees is included here, but that's partially offset by the reductions in some of the workers' compensation and actuarially determined pension plan contributions. So the decrease that you see in contracts is associated with towing contracts, and that's $75,000 decrease is the change from the original 2020 budget. But if you look at the column one over to the left, you'll see that it's an increase of $100,000 from what we experienced in our amended budget. So again, anticipating a gradual recovery associated with COVID-19. Within our vehicle storage fund, and it's operated as a business as well, we're expecting the revenues from the previous slide of $1,750,000 offset by expenses of $1,699,000 for net income of $60,690. Finally, our parking garage fund. And this fund represents the parking revenues for the convention center parking and the River Market parking that the city owns and that Little Rock Convention and Visitor Bureaus operates on our behalf. The revenue forecast of $2.5 million was discussed last week. Again, that's down from actual revenues in 2019. Which were also boosted by street repair or street cut revenues and much higher monthly parking than, and daily parking than what we've experienced during COVID. So the budget for 2020 originally was $2,962,000. That decreased in our amendments to $2,438,000. And we're now gradually increasing that back to $2,507,462. The increases in the monthly parking on line 4 and on line 3 for parking meters will be partially offset by the decrease in street repair revenues that we talked about last week. But in the far right column, you see we're still below $454,000 below where we anticipated our original 2020 budget would be. So in total, we're about 15% below the original 2020 adopted budget and 23% below our 2019 actual revenues. But on the next slide, you see our expenses. And one thing here, in the past, we've always shown parking deck operations, which is on line 5, as a single line item. We've now split that out to all the various categories as you see in the other funds. So if you look in the total line, the actual expenses in 2019 and the budgeted expenses in 2020 were $2,146,000 and $2,168,000 respectively. That decreased in 2020 with the budget amendments to $1,669,033. And that was due really to the temporary layoff of several employees at the parking decks when there was no parking other than the monthly card users during COVID. And then our 2021 budget anticipates some increase in that parking of $91,854 from the amended budget, but still approximately $400,000 below our 2019 and 2020 original budget. The net impact of those adjustments, or the net impact of the revenue less the expenses, is $746,575 in income, which provides debt service coverage for the bonds that constructed the decks. The interest portion is shown on line 10, but the principal portion, much like the waste disposal fund, is a reduction to the liability as opposed to showing up as an expense since this is a business operation. So, in total, you see all of our fund revenues that we've gone through with our expenditures that we've gone through. We have balanced budgets for the general fund, the street fund, the waste disposal fund, and the fleet fund. And we have net income in our vehicle storage fund and our parking garage fund for a forecasted net income of $807,265. This is a summary of the revenues by fund. So in total, our general fund makes up approximately 77% of revenues, with the waste disposal fund making up 9%, street fund 8%, and so on. So the total revenue forecast for all budgeted funds is $272,709,891. And on the expenditure side, it's $271,902,626. Again, for that net income of approximately $805,000. And the general fund makes up 77% of those expenses, street fund 8%, waste disposal 9%, and so on. So that concludes the presentation. I know there is an awful lot of information here, and that's why we wanted to take the time to go through it tonight, so that next week when we come back with it in the ordinance form, you'll have an opportunity to have spent some time really looking at it in combination with the revenues that we provided last week for any additional questions you might have. But at this point, I'm happy to take your questions.
Before we have any questions, just again, just want to share our appreciation to you, Director Linehan, and the entire team on the hard work to bring together a balanced budget for the 2021 year that's $2 million less than the 2020 original budget. And then also from a pre-COVID standpoint, that is close to $8 million less than 2019. All in total, with all generated funds, still with a net income of $807,000. That is a testament to your leadership, your team's leadership, and the ability to keep us balanced throughout this process as we're navigating a time no one has ever seen before, been prepared before at all, I guess since 1918, which nobody was alive then. And so I just want to just say thank you for your leadership. I know how much hard work you put in, the hours that you put in along with the team to get us to a $2 million change between 21 and 20. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Mayor.
Director Wright.
My question is not for Ms. Lanahan. Thank you, Sarah, for the balanced budget. I know how hard it is and how much detail and it is, and I appreciate the effort of you and your staff. But my question is for the mayor and the city manager. Mayor, you had asked board members to submit various proposals to you for consideration for the budget. Can you tell me where we are with those, or if they are included, or is there enough grant match allocated in order to apply for grant funding for some of the projects that I submitted?
We do have included for your, and Mr. Moore, please help me. You do have included some additional funds for your 21st, not for your, but for the city's 21st century community, 21st century.
After school.
After school. So that is included in this particular budget. The request that you did send to me, I believe it came to be somewhere around $4 to $6 million, if my memory is correct, to share with you. If you notice, again, this budget is $210 million from a general fund standpoint, which is $2 million less from 2020 and $8 million less from 2019. That being said, we held a flat budget. There are certain expenses that are incurred as a result of ongoing expenses that are increased. For instance, you saw certain things within human resources because of training models that you implement. You have to have maintenance and services from that standpoint. That's just one example. That being said, the expenditures that were increased in the budget were things, majority of the things were already in the budget from the 2020 year. And so there was not room for a number of different new things that was provided within your presentation of the 4.6, and also to be very transparent, before we made even further cuts in our iteration process, Director Linehan, Mr. Moore, and myself had to figure out a way, once we included things that when everyone wanted, and things like what you wanted, and portions of that, of looking into that, we had to cut down on close to $6 million to get to this point. And so it was not feasible.
What about the opportunity to apply for grants? Because I think I listed all of that in my proposal to you, with fully understanding that it could not all be funded out of the general fund, but we do have different departments' funds for our neighborhoods and our streets, and some of it could be funded in that manner. Is there any opportunity there?
There is some opportunity within the grant match. I believe, what page is that, Director Linehan, that are available?
I am going back to that. We had $230,000 in the budget for the grant match. That was in the general fund section.
But that appeared to be designated for particular grants, not
That
for
was,
new grants.
and there was $788,000, I think, carried over for grants that were continuing. But as you mentioned, there are some some funds in housing that come from, CDBG or different programs. And when those types of programs become available, and with our street fund, we always use street fund for road type project opportunities. Those funds are accumulated in the street fund balance, which actually is more than 100% of the annual revenues in the street fund. So that's available for like federal transportation grants, different road projects that come about.
Well, our neighborhoods typically don't qualify for that. I'm talking about like the 36th Street Bridge, which needs a pedestrian crossing. I'm talking about streets around our parks that are substandard, that their streets are too narrow to get down. I'm talking about projects like that that would need a grant match.
Well, and you'll recall that we were in the final expenditure stages of our latest bond issue for streets. We had $72 million set aside in our 3/8 cent fund for streets, in addition to the funding available in the street fund. But the 3/8 cent portion of our penny tax that was implemented in 2012 was a 10-year limited tax, so it expires next year. And all of those projects that the neighborhoods requested were in the final phase of completing those. So that will be something that the board will need to look at during 2021, whether or not in this current environment we can look at trying to renew that capital tax for those types of projects, or look at some other alternative. Again, as our bonds are retired and we have a dedicated property tax levy that pays down those bonds, and we are retiring those faster than what was originally anticipated. So we'll have an opportunity to potentially renew those bonds in another couple of years to make even more funds available.
Mr. Moore, is there any instruction or will on your part to work with our federal funds in relation to some of the projects that I submitted?
There is, and that's what we talked about. we have never, and usually you see this designated grant match fund, and that's what you see this year. But we have never not gone after an opportunity if we need additional matching funds. So, and the departments know that. They make the request if there's grant opportunities. So I feel very confident that if there's something that is very viable, that, and again, we want to leverage as much money as we can. So the answer to the question is yes.
Okay. Well, it's very critical to me because I'm going to be a no vote on this budget unless I get some assurances from you and the mayor that there will be opportunities to go out and seek other funding to address some of the issues that I have in my ward. And that's why I'm being in particular, Mayor, because we're giving outside funding to groups and things like that. And I have some real issues in Ward 6 that I need to get addressed.
Yes, ma'am, and I think what you've heard from Mr. Moore and myself, and if I didn't communicate it effectively, I do apologize, that there are opportunities to pursue new grants. We will pursue those as they present themselves based on funds available.
Mayor, I would like to add one thing on the outside agency funding that I didn't properly highlight. While we have a reduction in the funding for Rock Region Metro, we actually have increased service as a result of the RIDE 2020 initiative. So we're going to see additional service implemented that will, for example, go out to the promenade at Chenal, which will make that available for jobs for people throughout the city to go out. There'll be increased hours of operation and increased frequency. So there'll be some additional routes on Saturdays and Sundays that maybe wasn't there before. So this is an improvement for our citizens, and it's a part of that RIDE 2020 allocation, the realignment of the way that the partner cities participate in funding that so that it's not all based on centerline miles of service now. There's a division between fixed and variable costs. So as we want to change routes throughout the system, we have that opportunity without negatively impacting other communities who were participating in that cost-sharing model. And that's due to a lot of the innovation of our executive director, CEO of Transit, Charles Frazier. So I want to recognize that because that is something where we're getting more for less money.
Thank you so much. Director Adcock.
Yes, two things. Thank you, Sarah, but you know there's always questions. Would you rather me give them to you in writing so you can research them and get it back to me?
That would be fine. The more time, the better.
Also, Mayor, I sent you, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Carpenter some information this afternoon. During the campaign, we had a candidate, Mr. Dale Pickard, that during all the forums, he talked about the services that we provide to Camac Village and Maumelle. And he has done lots of research. I have sent all of the board members copies of his research, and all of you received one this afternoon. According to his research, if we charge the people the cost that it's costing our residents of Little Rock for these services, we would have an additional $250,000. So I would appreciate if you, Mr. Moore, and Mr. Carpenter would look at this and see if maybe this is something that would allow Doris to have some of her programs and some of the other things that the directors have on a want list.
Yes, ma'am. We'll review and follow up.
And I did want to thank him, and he's watching tonight because he put in lots of time researching this for us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director Adcock. Any more questions from board members? No. Please send questions to myself, Mr. Moore, Director Linehan. I'm sorry. Is there?
It's not on the budget.
And before we get to Director Hines, I believe we'll be moving forward. We don't have any citizens communication. Do we have any citizen communication? I do want to take this time. I know we said congratulations to Directors Adcock, Campiris, and and future Director Antoine Phillips yesterday, but we do have Mr. Phillips who joined the board meeting today, who will be serving replacing, which is hard to replace, is Director Gene Fortson, but Mr. Antoine Phillips, who won the most recent election for position 9. Mr. Phillips, if you would, please, if you would address the board if you have an opportunity.
Thank you, Mayor, for the recognition. Didn't come here to be recognized. Just wanted to be here and get ready to get to work because I'm excited. Look forward to working with everyone. Obviously, I'm being a new face to the board, but definitely familiar with each of you, being here on a lot of different occasions. And I'm excited about the opportunity to work to create a better Little Rock. During the campaign, that's what I heard people in Little Rock talk about, that they believe in better. And I know working with each of you, we can make Little Rock better for every citizen, every resident in our town. And I look forward to that opportunity. And right now, I'm playing catch up. So please be patient and bear with me as I get on the stage where you are as current board members in running this city and doing what the people elected us to do. So Mayor, thank you for the recognition, and I look forward to serving with all you starting in January.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Director-elect. Director Hines.
Thank you, Mayor. As we previously discussed before the meeting, I'm going to introduce 4 resolutions for the board for consideration to be put on our agenda next week and to hopefully be voted on the first meeting in December. One resolution is a resolution to express the concern of the Little Rock Board of Directors with the continued service of Keith Humphrey as Little Rock Police Chief and for other purposes. The other 3 resolutions are to recognize the IAFF, the FOP, and the AFSCME locations as the negotiating bodies for those unions that represent our employees. I've got copies here that I will give to the city attorney, the clerk, to be perfected and put on our agenda for next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director Hines. Director Computers.
Bruce, could you give us an update on when we're going to demolish that church on Mississippi? That I brought it up about.
Yeah, let me check on. I know we were citing them to court, so we'll prepare an update.
Well, I've gotten it's now becoming a sleepover place for the homeless, and
will do.
Thank you so much, Director Computers. Again, want to share our appreciation to the. I'm sorry, Director Richardson, is that you?
Yes, that's me, Mayor.
All right. Yes, sir.
Mayor, in reference to Lance's proposed resolution, Tom, are we following the proposed procedure with respect to timelines before introduction of any kind of legislation?
What the ordinance actually says is that if they've got to be presented 2 weeks before the agenda meeting, which they would be considered. So that would be the first agenda meeting in December for the second meeting in December.
That's fine, whatever the ordinance says.
Okay, I thought I heard Director Hines say for the agenda meeting next week, so I wanted to make sure we're within the timeline. I certainly have some questions about that I can't ask without seeing it, but I want to make sure we're following the proper procedure with respect to timelines in terms of introducing any kind of legislation. So it would be 2 weeks before, it won't be the next agenda meeting, if I heard you correctly, which is what I heard Lance say when he talked about introducing it.
Director Richardson, I just heard Director Hines say that the times that I mentioned would be fine. There is a provision in the ordinance for extraordinary votes to allow things to come faster, but the basic is to
say thank you so much for this process, and we do appreciate you to get us to, again, I want to state, I think that's big news, that we have a balanced budget that is $2 million less than what it was 2020, $8 million from 2019, with a net